If you saw me arrive early this evening in the first half through that door, partway through, you may be relieved to hear that I'm not here to preach about punctuality. But having said that, just from seeing you for a few moments, and just as I look around this room, even though for most of us we've only just met, you seem friendly, if I'm honest. No point lying about it, is there? You seem friendly. You're friendlier certainly than the school group I was with some months ago, where one of the boys in the front row pulled a face, looked at me, I said, "Are you all right?" He said, "Is your dad Harry Potter?" Not wishing to be outwitted by that teenage boy, I whipped my glasses off. I said, "Does that help?" He said, "No, Simon Cowell." In the course of the next 6.5 minutes, I hope you will feel I'm nicer than at least one of those two people. But it did set me thinking a couple of things. First of all, I thought, well, at least that boy, at least I've got his attention. But the other part of me thought, well, if I'm not the son of, or the father of Harry Potter, then who am I? It was like a voice in my head. I went from thinking, well, if you're not Harry Potter's dad, who are you? We live in a disruptive age. Not my words, that's Tom Peters, and you may have heard of him. Expert on business, management guru. But regardless of whether or not you believe that line, I wonder whether it isn't true that all around us in our lives, disruption is part of it. We see it in the nature and changing role of the family in our society. We see it in the impact of technology, the Arab Spring, the role of the internet. We see it in Twitter. We live in a world where there's so much change. So much is changing in our social lives, in government, in politics. One of my earliest childhood memories was the fall of the Berlin Wall. I thought, wow, they said it was the end of history, and it feels to me as though we're only at the very beginning of the tsunami of change. And I wonder in what ways things are changing or being disrupted in your own life, because it's true in business too. In some ways, and again, I'll have to be honest, I'm an unlikely person to be standing here in front of you today, because if you'd seen me 10 years ago, you'd have seen me having a panic. I had to make my first high-pressure phone call. I had a job in business, recruiting or playing a role as a researcher in a headhunting firm, recruiting executives at the highest level, really senior people. I was very junior, no real experience, bit nervous. First phone call to someone super senior, I thought, prepare your opening line. "Hello, John, I caught you at a convenient moment." Okay, here we go. And I was so worried about saying the right thing. Or, to be honest, so worried about saying the wrong thing, what I actually did was pick up the phone. "Hello, James, where have you caught yourself?" Where have you caught yourself is an embarrassing question to ask a man you've never met before. A year or so later, at my leaving drinks, I stood up in front of a group of people that I'd worked with for the best part of 18 months, almost 2 years, and I was invited to say a few words at my leaving drinks. And I was so petrified about saying the wrong thing, and that I ended up hyperventilating over a photocopier out of sheer fear. And if I look back, if I'm honest with you, it feels to me as though I was anxious about who, I didn't really know who I was, or I was so preoccupied with worrying about how I wanted other people to see me that I forgot to be the person that I actually was. If you're a fan of TED, if you've seen TED.com, if you've never been on TED.com, I can recommend it. There's a man, an education expert called Ken Robinson, who talks about the changing role of education. An education system that for years has been based on the needs of an industrial age. We have cohorts. Students are grouped by year. They're processed almost like a factory, so the argument goes. Whereas what we need is something far more flexible, far more tailored to the individual. I wonder whether the same isn't true in business. I wonder whether we haven't moved from a situation where business can be based on, if you like, logic to meet the needs of an industrial age, to one that is based now more on trust and the need to build relationships. Whereas before the system was king, I wonder now whether relationships are king or queen, perhaps. I mean, I don't have to spend much time on some of the social media outlets out there to see the impact of when you get relationships wrong. A friend of mine works in private equity, works supporting and financing businesses, and he said to me one day, he said, "Simon, we don't back business plans. We back management teams. I said, what does that mean? He said, it means when we look the management team in the eye, do we really believe that they mean what they say? And I began to think again about that phrase, who are you? I wonder how important authenticity, about being who we are, how much that might matter in our lives. Because it's so easy to play a role, isn't it true? We play a role when we're at work, perhaps. We might even play a role with family. I have a new role. I have a 3-month-old baby daughter, and I'm adjusting to a new role there. What face do I show my daughter? What face do I show the school children that I go and speak to? Or the business executives that I work with? Speaking of children in schools, as I said, part of my business involves going and spending time with teenagers in schools. And I can remember a year or so ago, I was in a school in Sutton. And in that school, I remember there being a boy who, well, let's put it this way, when he walked in the room, he was wearing a big puffy jacket. Now, usually puffer jackets for teenagers mean trouble. Or am I being stereotypical? But anyway, he walked in, I just thought, there's something about this guy that... And it was a challenge right the way through. He was the gobby guy at the back. Lots of the boys, they were great fun. This particular boy was gobby at the back. He was the one mucking around, he was the one shouting and causing mayhem, and it came to his final speech of the day. Every student in the group got to give a speech, and the deputy headmaster walked in to view the speeches. I thought, oh no, what is Darren going to say? I remember him walking up to the front. This is a guy who'd been louting around all day. He came up to the front and he looked us in the eye and he simply said this. He said, he broke all the rules, hands in pockets, crossed his legs a bit, walked backwards and forwards across the stage. He said, I know when you look at me, you think I'm a bit of a lout, a bit of a loser, but I'm not. Probably think I'm going to end up in drugs or in some gang, but I won't. And he went on to give the most spellbinding speech I've ever seen. And to see the deputy headmaster's face, it went from to... Because he had the courage to show us who he really was. And I wonder whether that might not be a message for all of us to take from. Certainly it's stuck in my memory, in business and leadership, in any role in our lives. The challenge to be who we really are. Who are you?